Hello there girls and boys, in this video I'm going to show you how to apply reverb to your drums. Welcome back to the channel girls and boys. As I said before, in this video we're going to be exploring some of the techniques that I apply when it comes to bringing a little bit of life to your drums by using reverb. Yes girls and boys, in this video I'm going to show you my techniques and you won't believe how important reverb is for drums in general. If this is the first time in the channel, I welcome you, because in here I show you every single thing I do in order to create, rap, produce, and of course perform my music live, because I know that making a living as a musician is not a dream, it's a possibility. Yeah, and if I can do it, you can do it. With that being said, let's get into it now. Before we continue girls and boys, I gotta tell you this. All of the principles that I'm gonna be discussing in this video are based on what I explained to you in a previous video on which we explored the basic philosophies behind reverb in music. So I really recommend you to watch that video first. It should be somewhere on the screen already. Now that I assume that you already watched that video, we're gonna get into it now. Welcome back girls and boys to Logic Pro X. In front of us we have the project that I'm gonna use to show you how to apply reverb to your drums. Before anything else happens girls and boys, we are gonna take a closer look to the track, so that way we can have an idea of how this thing sounds like. So here we go. Cool, now that we've got an idea, let me explain what's going on. Right now we're using two reverbs to put all of the instruments inside of the same room, exactly following the same principles that I explained to you in the previous video. Now, the trick with the drums set, it's the following girls and boys. We're gonna apply different reverbs to certain instruments, but not following the same principle. Right now, what we're gonna do with those reverbs is gonna extend the sound or the tail or the release, if you put it in a different way, of each of those individual sounds to make them sound larger than life. Okay, girls and boys, so let's do it now. Okay, girls and boys, let's begin. The first thing that I'm going to show you is the amount of energy being sent by each of the individual pieces that are parts of the drum kit. Okay, so first, you might be wondering which elements are going to be sent to the reverbs. And if you say that each of the individual parts of the drums are going to be sent to the reverb, you're quite wrong, girls and boys. Because beginning from the kick drum is the one that I'm not sending any form of energy. And I'm going to use this area. This is the inspector area. And here I got selected my kick drum already. And as you can see, there is no information being sent from the kick to the different reverbs. If we take a look at our snare, you're going to see that we got all sorts of buses, and three of them, this guy over here, girls and boys, is a whole reverb, which is one of the main reverbs in our system. Then we got a plate reverb, once again, but then this guy over here, S-verb, is the one that I made specifically for our drums. More on that later. Now, taking a closer look to our toms, this is a completely different situation, girls and boys, because we only got one specific bus, and it's being used for reverb purposes, of course, girls and boys, but it's only for our toms. That's why we got this little thing called T-verb, because I put that name because that's an easy way for me to remember that this is the reverb that we're going to be using only for our toms. Then hi-hats, and of course we're using the main reverbs and room. And of course, once again, only main reverbs are being used. Now, how about the amount of energy being sent to those main reverbs? That's a great question, girls and boys. The only way to do it is by listening to the track and adding that energy little by little. So let me show it to you right now. Coming back to Logic, girls and boys, what I'm going to do is the following. I'm going to select the different instruments that are part of the drum kit that are being sent to our main reverbs, girls and boys. And I'm going to try to be as fast as possible, because that's the way you have to do it. So now, how to know how much energy you have to apply to each of those individual elements? Let's press play and add it to taste. Here we go. First, the snare. nice, nice. It's sounding cool. Because remember, girls and boys, we're adding depth and height to our sound, as I said in the previous video. So I'm gonna run through all of the different elements now. Now, you saw me doing that little trick when I pushed the synth to its limits. Why did I do that? Well, the reason is because that's a really easy way for you to know how or to see the impact of that reverb being applied to the sound source. By just sending a shared load of it into the circuit, you're gonna get a feedback response on which you will see the amount of energy or how the reverb is gonna react. From there, you're gonna be able to back it up for as long as you see fit. That way you can make sure that you're getting the best out of the whole situation. So I'm gonna do the same for the rest of the instruments, and we're gonna get into the individual reverb circuits then. Here we go. I like it, girls and boys. Now, here's the deal, girls and boys. The first element that we're going to be discussing is going to be the toms. The reason why I'm not using the same reverb for the toms is this. When you're dealing with toms, girls and boys, they are barely played during the song because you use them for the fills most of the time. And if you apply the general reverb, it would feel a little bit lackluster because a tom, we're quite used, sorry girls and boys, but we're quite used to the sound of ridiculously large toms in the likes of what you would find in Guns N' Roses records, for example. And the way to achieve that kind of sound is by applying a different reverb for the toms. So let me show you how does that works. Coming back to logic, girls and boys, here you got the amount of energy being sent to my toms reverb, girls and boys. And I'm gonna use the inspector once again because it's gonna be easier. And over here you got once again the same display. You're watching exactly, and you're looking at exactly the same thing that you were able to when I had the mixer open. And if I click on any of these elements, girls and boys, I clicked on the synth, you will have this, which is a pro tip, girls and boys. This is going to be a pro tip. Anytime that you click on any of these elements, the track beside your main track, which is this guy over here, it's going to show you the synth or where that track is being sent to, okay? So right now, we're looking at the toms reverb, and I am using my beloved little plate, girls and boys, made by the fine people at Sound Toys, and here is the parameters that I'm using. I'm gonna go back to the beginning and I'm gonna solo the toms, okay? I want you to pay close attention to how this reverb is gonna make the sound of the toms larger than life. First, without. Kind of boring? With. Bam! Now we got something that sounds like a record, right? So I'm gonna bring back the rest of the mix. And one more thing before we continue. The amount of decay in this circuit, it's gonna tell us how long this reverb tail is gonna be. And as a result, you can shape and you can decide how big the sound of your toms is gonna be just by using this decay knob. That's really cool and it's really important, girls and boys. Now, it's time to hit the snare, girls and boys, and the snare is gonna be where the money is at, okay? So, as I explained to you first, girls and boys, at the beginning of this discussion, I am using and applying these two main reverbs, girls and boys. We're talking about the plate and the hole, because we want first the snare to feel like it's beside or inside of the same room as the rest of the instruments and beside the drummer. But also, a snare sound, it's usually larger than life when it comes to recorded music. Why? Because for whatever reason we find that sound to be more interesting, probably because it's one of the driving forces behind the rhythmic section of any song. The funny thing about reverbs and snares is that you can do it in two different ways, girls and boys. You can make it sound natural and just help the sound of the snare to be heftier and a little bit heavier sounding, or you can go nuts and do it in a way that it's more following some sort of aesthetics, girls and boys. Stay tuned, girls and boys, because when it comes to snares and reverb, there is more than meet the eyes. So more on that later, girls and boys. Now, coming back to this. First, I'm gonna show you how the snare sounds by itself without the extra reverb. I'm gonna show you just the sound of the snare itself with the natural sounding reverbs, or the ones that we're using to put our snare inside of the same room, okay? Solo. Pay close attention to the release tail, girls and boys. That's quite important. Now I'm gonna bring back the rest of the drums and the mix itself. The snare feels that it's there with the rest of the band. Now I'm gonna remove the reverbs on the snare just for sake of conversation, girls and boys. And I want you to see how the snare is gonna be affected. The first thing that you're gonna notice is that the snare is not as heavy and as punchy as it was before. Here we go, without. It also feels like it's outside of the room, right? It feels that it doesn't belong. Now, I'm gonna bring back the main reverbs and I'm gonna add the third one, girls and boys. And this is the specialized reverb that we're only using for our snare. And this is the sound that we're using, or the circuit that we're using. We're using, once again, Reverb Suite Classics. And we're using these parameter, girls and boys. This is a plate reverb. And actually, this is inspired by this preset called Snare Space 1, which is quite cool. I liked it quite a lot. Now, see what happens when I bring it up. Here we go, with. It's an even heavier and punchier sounding snare, girls and boys. It feels natural, it feels like it belongs to the drum kit, but we added an extra layer of excitement. It's not as boring as before. Now it feels like a punchy record. But how about this, girls and boys? Back to the future, girls and boys, and yes, I'm not joking. We're gonna be applying 80s style reverb to our snares. How? Or what does that mean? That's a great question. I don't know, but if you remember, or if you are fond of the 80s as I am, you will remember that there are some records that have this weird but interesting and punchy sounding snare. You know which one I'm talking about. Every time that they hit the snare, there was a pa, something like that, girls and boys. That's called reverb gate. And what does that mean? It means this, girls and boys. Imagine that we're sending our signal as before to an independent bus. Okay, girls and boys? But then how about this? Let's say that our reverb is gonna be extremely ridiculously big, but we're gonna be controlling the release tail by applying a gate at the end of the whole process. That way we can get that kind of gated sound. Hence the name. Now let me show you how it sounds like. I already got here my snare reverb circuit already ready to rock. But I'm gonna remove the Reverb Suite that we already used, and then I'm gonna turn on these two plugins, girls and boys. The first one is gonna be our reverb, and then the second one is gonna be our noise gate. Please pay close attention to the sound of the snare. Really interesting, isn't it? Now we got a completely different sound, and this time around we got a much more punchier sound, if I put it that way. It's not better, it's different, and it's reminiscent to what you could hear from a Guns N' Roses record, once again, or even Metallica. Now, how does that work, girls and boys? This is gonna be quite cool, and it's not as hard as you might believe. First, we gotta open or insert our reverb, girls and boys. This time around we're using RC48, made by the fine people at Softtube. And this is a really cool reverb because it's mimicking a Lexicon reverb, which is one of those 80 sounding reverbs that everybody loves. And the cool thing about it is that we can not only manipulate the sound of our reverb, but also we can change and control the amount of energy being sent as the output, girls and boys. And we can select either the low energy or the mid frequencies. And also we can control how the highs behaves on the output. That's cool. And if you don't even know what does that means, don't even care, girls and boys. This is about the sound. It's not about science. And for as long as we get a beautiful sound, that's the only thing that matters. So, coming back to the rest of the equation. The second plugin is this guy. Just a regular, run-of-the-mill, super simple and humble noise gate. And this is the one that comes built in with Logic, girls and boys. Now, the trick is gonna be here, girls and boys. Here we got something called sidechain. Bam! And a sidechain, it's gonna do the following. Imagine that you want to control one of the elements inside of your mix by the sound of something else happening inside of your mix. The way to do is this. When you have a sidechain, you are telling the plugin that every time that something happens in that track, it's gonna be the moment for the plugin to react. And this means that if, for example, you have a kick drum and you want the bass to go completely silent every time that the kick drum hits, you are gonna make that happen by telling the noise gate, in this particular case, to react only when the kick drum is hit. For as long as there is no kick drum, the bass is gonna continue without any form of processing happening on it. You get it? I know you did. Now, let's continue. So these are the parameters that I applied to my noise gate, and it's super simple, girls and boys. And how did I came up with these parameters? By experimenting, girls and boys. There is no other way. So I'm gonna solo the snare, so you can have an idea how it sounds like by its own. But this is not the snare; it's gonna be just the reverb. Interesting, isn't it? But let me now bring the snare, and you will see how it sounds like with the sound of the snare as well. Now it sounds like the 80s. And there you have it, girls and boys. As you just saw, girls and boys, applying reverb to your drums is extremely important, because not only it's going to allow you to reach that coveted ready sound, but also it's gonna allow you to express yourself as a mixer and as an artist in general in a different way, because as you just saw, reverb and drums, it's also an aesthetic decision, and you can use reverb as a way to shape your sound in general. If you'd like to support this channel, the best way to do it is by listening to our music in Apple Music and Spotify, and also following us on social media such as Instagram. As every single time that I meet you, girls and boys, I gotta remind you something. Never, ever, ever let anybody tell you what to dream about. And remember that I will see you when I see you.